My father didn't wish me a happy birthday, he just called to borrow money for his daughter and then tried to steal $500 from me. I never expected my birthday to be anything special. By now, I had learned not to set my hopes too high. But this year, this one hurt more than I thought it would. I woke up that morning with a quiet sense of anticipation, despite myself. I wasn't a child anymore, I didn't expect cake, balloons, or gifts wrapped in crisp paper. But a call? A message? Maybe even a small, fleeting acknowledgement from my father? That didn't seem like too much to hope for. I checked my phone, still lying in bed, the cool morning light slipping through my curtains. The screen was blank, no missed calls, no texts, nothing. I told myself it was still early. He'd remember eventually. Hours passed. I distracted myself with work, answering emails, running errands, trying not to let the silence from him gnaw at me. But every time I glanced at my phone, it was just the same empty notifications staring back at me. My chest felt tighter with each hour that went by. By evening, it was clear, he wasn't going to call. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, telling myself it didn't matter. It wasn't like this was the first time. It wasn't like he had a great track record with birthdays or any significant moments in my life, really. And then, just as I was about to give up, just as I was mentally filing this day away as another disappointment, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. For a split second, relief washed over me. He did remember. Maybe he had been busy, maybe something had come up, but he was calling now. That was something, right? I answered, my voice lighter than I expected it to be. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, kid," he said. His voice was the same as always, casual, distant, like he was calling an old acquaintance rather than his own child. "How's everything going?" I hesitated, waiting. He didn't say it. I tried to lead him there. "It's been an okay day. Just, the usual." That's good," he said absent-mindedly. Then he cleared his throat. "Listen, I hate to ask, but, do you think you could spot me some money?" And just like that, whatever small, fragile hope I had built up shattered. I swallowed, gripping the phone tighter. "What?" "I just need a little help," he continued, as if he hadn't just completely knocked the wind out of me. "Nothing major. Just enough to get me through this week." I could have laughed. I could have screamed. But instead, I sat there, staring at the floor, feeling something inside me crack, not all at once, but piece by piece. He hadn't called to say happy birthday. He hadn't even remembered. He called because he needed something. Again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You know what today is, right?" There was silence. I could almost hear him thinking, scrambling, trying to put the pieces together. And then, with a hesitant chuckle, he said, Tuesday." I closed my eyes. "It's my birthday, Dad." More silence. Then, as if realizing he had made a mistake but not wanting to acknowledge it, he quickly said, "Oh. Of course. Happy birthday, kid." I was just about to say that. "Sure." I clenched my jaw, pressing my free hand against my forehead. "Right. Look, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," he continued, shifting back to his real reason for calling. "I'm in a bit of a tight spot, and I figured you'd understand." "Understand?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. I had given him so many chances. So many moments where I told myself that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But it never was. "Yeah, you know how it is," he went on, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Just need a little loan. I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I could have said so many things. I could have told him how much it hurt, how tired I was, how every single time he reached out, it was for something, never just to check in, never just to see how I was. But I knew better. I knew it wouldn't change anything. So I just let out a slow breath and said, "I can't help you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with that same casual tone, he said, "Oh. Well, all right. No problem." And that was it. No apology. No attempt to make up for forgetting my birthday. Just a quick, emotionless, "No problem." "Yeah," I said. "No problem." We hung up. And that was how my father let my birthday pass without so much as a thought, except, of course, for the money he needed. I sat there for a long time, my phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen as if it might somehow undo what had just happened. I shouldn't have been surprised. This wasn't new. This wasn't some shocking betrayal. It was just the same old pattern repeating itself, like a song stuck on an endless loop. But somehow, this time, it hurt more. Maybe because I had let myself hope, just for a second, that today would be different. The night stretched on, the silence of my apartment pressing in around me. I thought about calling someone, maybe a friend, maybe even my mom, but what was I supposed to say? That I was upset because my father had forgotten my birthday? That I felt stupid for expecting anything else? They'd all heard this story before. And I didn't want to hear the usual responses. That's just how he is. You know he's not good at remembering things. You shouldn't take it personally. But it was personal. How could it not be? I finally set my phone down and tried to shake it off. It was my birthday, after all. I could still do something for myself. So, I decided to go out, nothing big, just a quiet dinner alone at my favorite restaurant. I got dressed, put on something nice, and walked into the city, the night air crisp against my skin. The streets were busy with people, couples laughing, groups of friends spilling out of bars, their voices warm and full of life. I wished I could be one of them. At the restaurant, the hostess smiled and asked, "Table for one?" I nodded. She led me to a quiet corner, and I ordered my favorite meal. I tried to focus on the food, the ambience, the small pleasure of treating myself. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A father and his daughter, sitting at a table near the window. She looked about 10, her eyes shining as she talked excitedly, waving her hands while he listened intently, nodding along with a smile. At one point, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped gift, sliding it across the table to her. Her face lit up as she tore off the paper, revealing a delicate silver bracelet. I looked away, swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't jealousy, exactly. I didn't begrudge that little girl her happiness. It was just a reminder. A reminder of what I had never had. A reminder of what I had always wanted. I finished my meal in silence and left the restaurant, walking aimlessly through the city, trying to clear my mind. That's when my phone rang again. For a brief, stupid moment, I thought it might be my dad, calling back, maybe realizing his mistake, maybe trying to make it right. But it wasn't. It was my bank. Confused, I answered. "Hello?" A polite but distant voice responded. "Hi, this is Madison from your bank. We're calling regarding a recent flagged transaction attempt." My brows furrowed. "What transaction?" "There was an attempt to withdraw $500 from your account earlier this evening. We wanted to verify whether this transaction was authorized by you." I stopped walking. $500? My pulse quickened. I didn't make any withdrawals today. There was a pause. "I see. Well, the transaction was declined due to unusual activity, but we wanted to confirm with you directly." I felt a cold wave wash over me. "Where was the attempt made?" "At an ATM in Riverton," she replied. Riverton. My father's neighborhood. I clenched my jaw. "Do you know who tried to make the withdrawal?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "The card used was a linked account under the name," she paused, as if checking something, then continued, "Michael Reynolds." I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course, he would. I had forgotten I even had him as an authorized user on my account. It had been years ago, one of those things I did without thinking, back when I still believed he might need me, back when I thought that giving him access to a little emergency money was a good idea. And now, on the same day he had forgotten my birthday, he had tried to take money from me without asking. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Remove him from my account. Permanently." The bank representative hesitated. "Would you like to file a fraud report?" Fraud. The word made something twist in my chest. "No," I said. "Just take his name off. Make sure he can never do this again." "Understood," she said. "We'll process that immediately. Sorry for the inconvenience." I barely heard the rest of the call. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. He hadn't just forgotten my birthday. He had tried to steal from me. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I stood there for a long time, staring at the city around me, the neon signs blurring in my vision. Then, slowly, I turned and walked home, my footsteps heavy, my heart even heavier. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt done. This was the last time. I didn't know what that meant just yet, but I knew, deep in my bones, that something had changed. And there was no going back. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with the bank over and over again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's name on my account. I saw the notification that could have drained me of $500, money I worked for, money I needed. And the worst part? He hadn't even asked. He hadn't even given me the courtesy of a lie, some half-hearted excuse about an emergency, some story about needing help. No, he had just tried to take it. As if he had the right. As if I was nothing more than a wallet he could reach into whenever he pleased. I sat up in bed, rubbing my temples, willing myself to push it away. But I couldn't. This wasn't something I could let slide, not anymore. I grabbed my phone and stared at his number. I could call. I could demand an explanation. But I already knew how it would go. He'd laugh it off, say it wasn't a big deal. Maybe even try to gaslight me into believing I was overreacting. Or worse, he'd play the victim. He'd sigh heavily and tell me he was just desperate, that he was struggling, that he didn't want to ask me directly because he knew I'd say no. And then, somehow, the conversation would turn into me feeling guilty. That was always the cycle. No. Not this time. Instead of calling him, I opened my banking app and combed through my settings, making sure he was completely locked out of everything. I changed my passwords. I froze my card temporarily, just in case. I removed every trace of him from my finances, piece by piece, until he was nothing but a bad memory. And then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked his number. A deep, shaky breath left my chest as I stared at the confirmation. Blocked. Just like that. No more late-night requests for money. No more guilt-tripping phone calls. No more fake concern masking another favor. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt empty. Because deep down, there was still that little voice inside me, the one that always held on to the hope that maybe, one day, he'd change. That maybe, one day, he'd wake up and realize I wasn't just some resource he could tap into. That I was his child. But that voice was smaller now. Weaker. Dying. Because I was finally starting to accept the truth. I wasn't his child. I was his safety net. And I was cutting the rope. The next day, I went about my life like normal, or at least I tried to. I worked. I went grocery shopping. I even met up with a friend for coffee. But through it all, I felt like I was waiting. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the moment he realized he'd been cut off. It didn't take long. That evening, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Did you block me?" I sighed, setting the phone down without responding. A minute later, another text came through. "If you needed space, you could have just said something." I scoffed out loud. Space? That was rich, coming from him. Another text. "I just needed a little help. You really couldn't spare anything for your own father?" And there it was. The guilt trip. Right on schedule. Another. "After everything I've done for you." I let out a humorless laugh. Everything he'd done for me? Like what? Like forgetting birthdays? Like disappearing when I needed him? Like only showing up when he needed something? I locked my phone and tossed it onto the couch. I wasn't playing this game. Not anymore. Then, just as I turned away, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I shouldn't have listened. I should have just deleted it. But something in me, some old, lingering habit of hoping for the best, made me press play. His voice came through, low and tired. "Look, I don't know why you're acting like this, but I don't deserve it. I raised you. I took care of you. And now, when I need you, you just shut me out?" A pause. "I don't have anyone else, you know. I thought you understood that." Another pause, longer this time. Then, in a tone so casual it made my stomach turn, he added. But, hey. I get it. I'll remember this the next time you need something from me. Click. I stared at my phone, my pulse thudding in my ears. And then, slowly, I started to smile. Not because anything was funny. Not because I was happy. But because for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. There it was. The truth, laid bare. He didn't love me. He just wanted to control me. And now that he couldn't, now that I was cutting him off, he was trying to scare me into coming back. Trying to make me believe I'd regret this. I exhaled sharply and deleted the voicemail. Then I blocked the new number. This time, it did feel freeing. Because I finally knew, I wasn't waiting for him to change anymore. I was done waiting. I was just done. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No more texts. No more calls. No more last-minute pleas for help. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. At first, I kept waiting for the fallout, the dramatic message, the unexpected knock on my door, the guilt trip that would try to drag me back in. But it never came. And I realized something. He wasn't fighting for me. He was fighting for access to me. And now that it was gone, now that he knew there was no more money to take, no more favors to squeeze out of me, he just stopped. That should have made me sad. But all I felt was relief. A week passed. Then 2. And for the first time in years, my father was not a presence in my life. I started sleeping better. My appetite came back. I even found myself enjoying the little things again, morning coffee, a good book, the quiet simplicity of knowing I didn't have to brace for his next demand. It was strange, the way peace could feel so foreign. Like something I had never realized I was missing until it finally arrived. And then, just when I thought I was free, he showed up. It was late. I was curled up on my couch, lost in a movie, when the sharp knock at my door made me freeze. I knew. Before I even looked, before I even checked the peephole, I knew. And sure enough, when I peeked through the tiny glass circle, there he was. My father. Standing in the dim light of the hallway, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, his expression carefully neutral. I didn't open the door. But I did answer. What do you want? I said, loud enough for him to hear through the wood. He sighed, shifting his weight. Come on, kid. Don't be like this. I stared at the door, my fingers gripping the handle, the old, familiar battle warring inside me. Part of me wanted to let him in. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say. But the stronger part, the part that had spent years being used, the part that was exhausted from giving and never getting anything back, kept my hand firmly on the lock. What do you want? I repeated. I just wanted to talk, he said, and his voice had that practiced softness, the one he always used when he was trying to sound sincere. Face to face. No drama. I almost laughed. No drama? After everything? I don't have anything to say, I told him. A beat of silence. Then, quieter, so that's it, huh? You're just done with me? I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the door for a brief moment. Then, with a steady voice, I said, I was done the moment you tried to steal from me. He exhaled sharply, like he'd been punched. I would have paid you back, he said quickly, a little too defensively. I just... No, I cut him off. You wouldn't have. Another silence. Then, a dry chuckle. So, what, you think you're better than me now? That old trick. The one meant to make me feel guilty. To make me doubt myself. But it didn't work anymore. I straightened, keeping my grip firm on the lock. I think I'm tired, I said simply. Tired of pretending this is anything other than what it is. More silence. Then, a low, tired voice. Well. All right then. I heard the shuffle of his shoes as he turned to leave. I waited, holding my breath, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. Only when I was sure he was gone did I exhale, my entire body sinking against the door. I thought I might cry. But I didn't. I just felt lighter. Because this time, I hadn't let him in. And for the first time in my life, I knew, he never would again. Weeks passed. Then months. And I moved on. I built a life without him in it. I celebrated my next birthday with friends, with laughter, with people who actually cared. And when the day came and went without so much as a missed call from him, I realized. I didn't miss him. I didn't need him. And I was finally free. I'm moving forward. And this time, I'm choosing me. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.